Agent?
I thought we were going to take a look at each of the items on the contract.
I think we need to do that also. I mean, I think Dr. Hudson was expressing some of his concerns he has about the contract and renewing the contract in general. So I just was giving anybody else an opportunity to speak at the moment if they want.
Yeah.
We could look at the individual terms also.
Let's look at this first. Then I also have my own comments.
Okay.
Like he said. The first one, we're not given any option. All we wanted was, I mean, all that was written here was 2 years. That's what we're, but the numbers start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Correct. We can.
0 was not there.
This was the.
0 was not there.
That is.
Not even. We didn't start from 0. We started from 2. Okay, I'm not pleased with that. Then the second one is that we're talking about increasing salary, but the last evaluation does not validate that. Okay? The residency requirements he asked for, that if you be allowed to stay out of the district, that I disagree, because if board members, if I live where I'm living now and go to Lone Lock, I'll have to get out of the board. So if that applies to board members, it should apply to him too.
Yeah. So I think we have the option to not renew his contract. And I think Mr. Hanlon provided this contract and say we could not renew it, which would be 0, or we can amend it to approve it for 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years. We have that option of any of that time frame up until 4 years. So that is on the table. Dr. Shiley, do you want to make any comments about what's been commented on so far? I don't know. Just throw it out there, the residency requirement or anything else.
The input that I believe each one of you all gave to Nicholas individually, and the input that I gave to Nicholas, I think he tried to take that collective input and put it into something. So from that standpoint, when you look at other superintendents in the region, Callaway superintendent lives in Mayfield, and Hickman's County superintendent lives in, you keep going through there. McCracken County superintendent lives in Lyon County, and Lyon County superintendent. That's just not something that's common nowadays, and so that doesn't cost any money for the district. So that was a question I had: would that be relaxed? From that standpoint, doesn't mean I'm moving. That just doesn't cost anything in case I do.
Can I say something about the residency requirement? You need to stay in the district where you raise taxes. I've been on this board and we have raised taxes at least twice. You need to stay in the same district where the board members have to stay, where taxes are raised. If we can put that burden on people by raising taxes, the superintendent also should be a part of the board and follow through. That's my point.
I would add that in 8 years, nobody's ever asked me where I lived relative to that aspect. Not arguing with you, just that's the piece. Relative to a salary compensation, when I was asked what does that make sense, I contacted the Kentucky Association of School Administrators asking for their advice, because they work with 171 superintendents across the state. I did the same thing with Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. The numbers that they gave me were not what I thought were reasonable. They were higher. And so as a starting point for a conversation, what I thought was rational the last few years is Dr. Hudson says teachers saw 3.5% raises. That's not something that I saw, or 1% or 2%, not something that I saw relative to that. And so what I did to start that conversation was take my last contract salary and I divided that by my rank and experience on the certified teacher salary scale. In the last 4 years, I've gotten obviously 4 more years of experience, and so I took that ratio of the salary that the board set in the last contract, divided that by the rank and experience at that time, and came up with a multiplier and requested that to be the multiplier based on the teacher scale. So that's the rationale behind that.
Are there questions, comments from the board regarding the contract, just the rough proposal that's there? We've got some suggestions regarding maybe the duration. We've got some suggestions regarding the residency requirement. Any other comments regarding the contract itself?
I need to be clear. What is the raise that you're asking for percentage-wise? Total, because I have 11.7% based upon the email that I got from Nicholas. It shows an increase of,
I think it's
not on there, it's an email that he sent us.
It's not, I don't believe it's 11.7. I think 11.7 is actually,
Pardon?
11.7, I think, in that email, I don't have it in front of me, was a reference to the actual cost of living adjustment for Social Security benefits over the last 4 years. I don't have the calculation. I do believe I made it, but I think it's I don't think it's 11.7. I think that, let me second roll.
So what you put in your email is that it would be, as a percentage, it would be a 4.3% raise, which has not occurred in the past 4 years. So there's been no increase over the past 4 years.
There has been no, right, his salary in the last contract was a set amount. Every year he got the same set amount. He's not received any raises over the course of that contract. That's how it was drafted. That's what we agreed on. I'm not saying it was wrong.
And,
But that's how it has been.
and over the last 2 years, $25,000 of his salary was forfeited to help pay for some of the training.
So
that he
to
went through,
offset, right,
to offset the
time
cost of the training. So if you start from where he was 4 years ago to now, what's proposed, I believe it's 4.3%.
And so when you factor in what the cost of living you said,
Well, I was just trying to give, I think in that email, I was trying to give you a rough estimate of what the cost of living adjustment would be for Social Security. And so over the last 4 years, just for Social Security, which is just a government cost of living adjustment, that I believe, again, I don't have the email in front of me, has increased 11.7.
So just to put some real numbers on it, roughly without the actual dollars and cents, he made in the range of $149,000 the last 4 years. The proposal was $155,000, which is a 4.3% raise. If you went by cost of living recommendations, then that would have been an 11.7%, which would be $166,000. So what's in this contract here is 4.3% higher than he has made the last 4 years. If I'm understanding the email.
I believe that's
correct.
correct, yeah. And we set our survey.
so give me the bottom line. What would we be paying him?
155 on this proposal, which again can be amended. Anybody can propose an amendment to this proposed contract. We would pay him $155,024.60, which represents the portion of his salary that comes from his rank and experience, simply increasing by his rank of experience over the past 4 years, not cost of living. So it's years, it's what he would have received each year based on his rank and experience, based on the portion of his salary that is calculated from that.
Again, I would say this, as we give teachers raise, as superintendent, his should be the same that teachers get.
Exactly.
when we start giving teachers 4.3% raises, then let's get the superintendent. Let's be fair about this.
Let me remind you, last year alone, every employee in this district, except me, got a 3.5% raise across the board. So that did not receive that.
Well,
So
then let's go
you've
with
got 3 other
3.5%.
years
If
relative
you
to
get
that.
your job, 3.5%. Simple. That's what the
Well,
teachers
you also
got.
have those other years that are factored in that I didn't receive that either. The
See,
way
that's-
that set up is if they do receive a raise, then that would go towards the superintendent too, the way that's written.
Ms. Copeland, do you know how many raises we've given employees in the past 4 years as a percentage?
Figure 3.5 is the only one that I now know.
What did you say?
The 3.5% from last year is the only one I've been here for. And I've been here for years.
So Dr. Hudson, are you proposing an amendment to this contract to say 3.5% raise from, increase from where he was before? Again, this is, I think what the proposal here was not a raise as much as it was the years of rank of experience, but we can look at it both ways. So would you recommend we adjust this figure to represent 3.5%? Or are any teachers here, you know, if you all got a raise 4 years ago? I don't remember.
No.
Okay. So Dr. Hudson, do you want to make a motion to amend this to a 3.5% instead of 4.3? This dollar figure?
No.
Okay. The, any other questions from the board or comments regarding any specifics within the contract? Okay. A couple comments from my standpoint, just in general. When I look at his last evaluation, I look at his last 2 evaluations. There are 7 areas which we evaluated him on. In the area, and most of them, in the area of strategic leadership, he was exemplary. In the area of instructional leadership, he was accomplished. In the area of cultural leadership, we gave him growth required. In the area of human resources leadership, we gave him developing. Managerial leadership, exemplary. Collaborative leadership, exemplary. And collaborative leadership, accomplished. And influential leadership, developing. And all of those were a step back from where we had evaluated him on his first contract, except for the ones that are exemplary. There have been a lot of accomplishments in our district that I think need to be pointed out. I could list all of them, but I'm not going to. Somebody mentioned the Head Start building tonight. We'll now have Head Start full-time for over 300 kids as opposed to half-time for 270. Ms. Lennox, I disagree that the Innovation Hub is simply a newer building of what we had before. There is programming to try and help connect kids to area businesses, to help them return to this community after they come from a different job, or after they train elsewhere as well. There's a lot of programming and development of programs through that are growing, and that Dr. Shively has developed and has worked on many of the connections to be able to do that. There's a makerspace that's impacting kids from elementary school to middle school to give them exposure to different careers and different opportunities earlier to help them grow. So I think there is very strong things going on there. In terms of managerial leadership, he's put us in a very good financial position. When I was first on the board, our carryover, and Ms. Copeland, our required is 3.5% or 3% carryover in our budget, something like that.
2%.
2%. We're required by the state to keep that amount of our total budget in cash. In my first many years on the board, we were always 3, 4. We're always questioning, are we going to be, on the watch list because we're too low? And all consistently throughout Dr. Shively's tenure as superintendent, we've been at double-digit carryovers, which has allowed us to maintain programs when we faced stressors, because we've had cash on hand to be able to keep things going where we didn't before. In terms of collaborative leadership, I think that he is trying and working on maintaining and developing partnerships with a very wide range of people in this community. And I think he's developed new relationships through the course of the past year that he did not have before. And I think his intentions, from what he's verbalized to me, are to continue in that endeavor. It's obvious tonight, and it's been obvious to me, you know, the culture of leadership aspect. There's still major issues with regard to trust, and I think there's major issues, you know, with regard to communication. The last year, there's been 40 days committed to training. Pastor Palmer gives his assessment that I must share that Superintendent Shively embraced this opportunity to explore, listen, and understand the history of racism, white supremacy, inequitable outcomes for disenfranchised populations, and the need to take individualized approaches with our youth of color. I found him to be engaging and introspective even during some very challenging and uncomfortable conversations. He has been highly professional. It's been apparent to me that he is a natural leader willing to learn and grow. He is a tremendous advocate for the Paducah students and their families, including great empathy for their struggles and barriers. I firmly believe that Superintendent Shively has embraced the philosophy of inclusion, collaboration, and relationship building in order to achieve the best outcome for his students. I just think we all need to remember some of the positives in addition to what was a very unfortunate incident. And I don't think, and I've heard people say that there's been, you know, it's just time to get over it and move on. I don't personally feel that way at all, and I haven't at any point here. It's obvious though that there's still a lot of working through it, and it would need to occur, and it would be very important moving forward. Dr. Hudson, you know, has raised concerns about wanting to get more streams of information to help evaluate the performance of the superintendent. We have at least completed, you know, something we haven't done before, a district-wide survey, which is a starting point. We'll have an open meeting sometime in the next month or two to review those results, and it's thick, and we're starting to work through that now. I do think there's other streams that we can develop, and with guidance from the board and input from other people, I think we can get more streams of evaluation moving forward. I think those are very valid points that he's made and brought up, and that we need to make sure as a board that we pursue. We have a contract we have to decide. As Dr. Okoji pointed out, we do have the option not to renew this contract. We have the option to amend this contract further and then vote on this contract. I guess I'd like to hear any more comments from the board regarding the contract that's on the table and whether they have any amendments to the proposed contract. And I guess while you're doing that, I'll just ask Dr. Shively, would you like to make any comments or any discussion? I guess this is a negotiation. We ought to hear from all parties and all people. And
Absolutely, without a doubt. When you face what we're facing with the challenges of COVID, the learning loss that we know is there, the gap that comes into play, RT and TP, which is our verbiage of saying the research from Hurricane Katrina on children that were displaced, didn't go to school. What did the research say that is successful in accelerating learning? We have been committed to that with a partner, which is where those letters come from. But that's how do we take best practices in the classroom from that hurricane and learning loss that caught children up. And we've effectively started building that model that vision into our district. I think that's the number one thing is children, and how do we ensure their success in the classroom. There's best practices with that. We're continuing to formalize that in writing and give deliverables and examples and work with our teachers on how you continue to meet the needs of children from that research. As you think of our district going forward, I think with those challenges and then with our communication piece and our connectivity piece, a huge piece for us is how do we connect to different organizations within the community, and I think that's very, somewhat similar to how we do with business and industry, is we sit down and have a very detailed discussion about what is it you're passionate about in the terms of how do we help ensure our children are successful. And so that you start building out those partnerships to collaborate on ensuring our children are successful. We've talked about that some in the past. We've implemented some things here or there. I think we'd be a lot more strategic and effective as we do that. I think communication is constant. It's got to be very diversified. It's got to be very ongoing. It's got to be authentic. Individual, small group, different ways for our community members to give input, whether it's face-to-face or surveys, same thing with our parents, same things with our students, relative to see the district from everybody's eyes, that lens from everybody in our district. And I think that we've started that somewhat with our student board members this year to give us a different perspective. We've started that with our student equity team. We're doing that in surveys as we're with elementary students on what do they think is a great principal. But actually understanding the school day, the obstacles, and how we can help them overcome those barriers through the eyes of our children. I think that's an area that we've got to continue. I think for our district, it makes a lot of sense to develop a district advisory community group to meet with, to discuss what's going on, to be accountable to different metrics, to get input in, and to be able to share, here's some of the challenges that we're facing, how can we strategically help each other with different partners across the organization and having that standing. And then, from the student voice standpoint, that's something that we realized a few years ago that we were asking a lot of adults, how do our children see this, what do they see as obstacles, how do we help them overcome that? And then it hit us that, hey, we need to be asking our children. And we need to be knowing what they see our challenges and how they see us helping them overcoming those challenges. And so doing that in a variety of ways, making that the culture of each building, to listen to children. We're lots of times making decisions within a school on a dress code without any student input, right, for example. So I think there's a way to really get to the point of where are the barriers and how can we help you overcome that relative to that. And then, we've made a commitment to equity. We have, it's been a discussion between you all as a board and me as a superintendent for multiple years, way back before a picture surfaced relative to how do we meet the needs of each and every child, knowing that each and every child comes in with a unique set of needs. And so that standpoint, commitment of having a district teacher, staff, equity team to give us information relative that Ms. Burris is leading, I think is a huge commitment for our district. Right now, that work is on how do we define equity. So when we talk back and forth between superintendent board members or employees to other employees or community members, that we have a single working definition of what that is, that we can always refer back to, because equity is, to me, a process that helps us get equitable outcomes. And so what are those needs along the way for individuals, for groups, for large groups to get to that point. And so we've got some good steps there. Once I think that's defined through the team, through our employees, that to me comes back to the board with a definition, and we take that and put that into board policy. And that's the lens that we look through for every process, procedure, step, action we take, is we need to take that through our equity policy. I just think it's got to be organically defined by our district, and we're working on that right now. And so those are major areas for growth, whether I'm superintendent or not, I think are before this district, before this board. relative to how do we better meet the needs of children, how do we better meet the need of our families, and how we help make this a better community overall. If that's kind of what you're making.
Should you say we're making some amendments?
Yeah, I'm gonna,
Are we still going to keep these 2 years or 1 year?
so I'm gonna get to that next here too. Yeah, so we're gonna have to, we'll, Dr. Shively, I can tell from the comments in the crowd tonight, people are still hurt. Do you have a process or a plan to regain trust?
Well, I definitely think that's an ongoing piece. We have, I think that's just being authentic. You know, I recognize that I hurt a lot of people, and I've been asked, why did you stay? And if I'm the one that hurt you, and if I'm the one that created horrible feelings, I feel like it's my job to help you overcome those, and I'm the person that can listen to that relative to that. And so, again, it is, you know, when you talk trust, it's congruency of what you say you're going to do and what you do. Relative to that, it's relative to the outcomes that you're producing. I think that happens in individual conversations. I think that happens in small groups and small team conversations. I think that happens in what you see in the school day, relative to the experiences our children are having. Our children deserve the best. They absolutely do. They deserve the best. When you look at the diversity, when you look at the socioeconomic status, the volume, our children deserve to have the very best. And that's, you know, what I've been committed to, trying to ensure that their school days, their school years, their school careers look like, and very passionate about ensuring that's a great experience. But on the trust side, it's just, you know, it's small step by small step. I think that's happened in some cases that we're growing. I think there's some areas that with some individuals or groups that we're still working on that piece, but I don't know that that's ever an issue that we're not going to be facing, whether I'm superintendent or not, when you look at it through a cultural lens of what education has looked like, what our outcomes have looked like for generations. And, you know, when you look at that challenge, I think we all face that in public education. And that's why you continue to strive to meet the needs of children and give them every opportunity and every resource we possibly can to help them meet the vision they have for their lives.
Our coach was wondering about that.
I have a question. Dr. Shively, I remembered on several occasions when this blackface issue came up, I told you, go to the black churches and talk to each one, address them, apologize to them. I wonder if you went to any of these black churches.
I have asked several pastors if that's an opportunity. I've not been invited to do that, so I felt like that was something I needed to listen to be straight to the point.
He did not ask me personally.
He didn't ask me.
We had people, we had comments earlier.
They are just saying that you
Yeah, I'm trying to, we had opportunities for public comment earlier, so. Do you have other questions for Dr. Shively, Dr. Koji?
No, what I'm saying, are we going to amend this
So-
to 1 year or to renew?
So I think the steps we can take at this point, if there's not other discussion, would be to just go through these and I'll entertain. First thing would be the duration of the contract. Is there a motion on the floor to leave it at 2 years? Or would someone want to amend it to 1, or to 3, or to 4?
I'll make a
Zero would be
motion that
zero would be
we,
a vote just not to renew the contract. So I think we're gonna get to a contract here that we can vote on is the process that we're going to take. Janice?
I'll make a motion that it be for 2 years.
So there's a motion just to leave it at 2 years. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a second. Are there any questions from the board or proposals to amend that differently than 2 years? Otherwise, we would just, I don't know that we need a motion for that, do we, Nicholas?
You know, well, ultimately, what you're trying to get to here, again, it's a little bit of a clumsy process, is
Is
a
it?
contract that you make a motion to approve.
Yeah,
So if there is, I think, even in this stage, I think it could be a little less formal
right.
than that. I think you could just sort of take a cross ball, unless there's a formal amendment. I just need some,
So unless somebody wants to amend a change, it will.
I would say
it
we
will
would
stay
do 2
2
years
years.
instead of trying to.
If somebody would like to amend it to 1 year, 3 year, 4 years, we can do that. Dr. Cody, would you like to propose an amendment to the time, duration, or should we leave it as is?
I make there needs to be some changes.
Correct, I was just looking at the years on the contract at the moment here, so but we can leave that set aside here for a second. Go ahead and make any proposal, or a motion to amend anything you would like to amend.
I realize that there's a call from the community that this contract not be renewed. But I also look at the dynamics of the board, and I can say that that won't happen. But I will say this. One of the calls that I made, that I mentioned earlier, whether or not Dr. Shiver should stay, we were asked to do that as a board. One of the responses I got was this: give him a year. All that he has learned from Dr. Palmer, all of that will be manifested in this next year. And if the board does not see, then do not renew his contract. So I know non-renewal is not going to happen, so I amend it to be just 1 year. Let us look at this, let's see what the state has to say, all of that.
So there's a motion on the floor to amend this contract for 1 year instead of 2. Is there a second?
I may settle for 1 year to enable Dr. Shavli to search for a new position in the district or out of the district.
So Dr. Hudson made a motion to amend this contract for 1 year. Are you seconding his motion to amend this contract to be for 1 instead of 2 years?
I'll second.
Is there discussion or comments from the board? Janice, you had mentioned 2 years before. Did you want to stick with that, or did you have
Yes,
any?
I'll stick with that.
Okay.
Do you have to vote on them individually?
We'll vote on this.
Individual.
Correct. Yeah,
Right, okay.
yeah. Dr. Hudson, to get a year, are there ways that we could leave it 2 years?
No.
Excuse me.
Okay.
But with the, the measuring
Okay.
items that you're concerned about in there.
Let me say this, and if you're on a 5-year probation, we need to take this next year as just 1 year. Let's see what happens. And if Dr. Shively is sincere and he's committed to what he says, it will manifest itself in a year. And I believe this, then I think you'll have a unified board, everybody be on the page together. But I think before we say 2, because if we say 2, then we are locked in at 2. But if we say 1, we come back and we look at it, then I think the board can then make a wise decision.
Can you support a renewal for a 1-year contract?
Pardon?
Can you support a 1-year contract?
What do you mean support?
Would you be comfortable with that?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
I call your attention to the 1-year contract. And that's, I'm not going more than that, 1 year and no more. I'm not voting for 2.
Right, I was asking before for a for a motion and a second, and your position is to amend the contract to 1 year, the contract that's on the table. Any other comments from the board? So if not, then we would take a vote on this particular amendment to amend it to 1 year at this point. Dr. Shively, do you have any comments about that? This is negotiation, so.
Well, I was gonna ask Mr. Holland, I think we've got two motions. One is a 2 year and one is a 1 year. So that was my question.
Well,
I was gonna ask him.
it was, I think, Janice's motion was on the floor first, and I think we did vote on this. That's a fair point. I don't know if there was a second.
Yes.
So, but that was really not a motion to amend this, since this was already kind of the way it was drafted. So
Right.
I think at the end of the day, like I said, what we need to get is a contract that can get sufficient votes to pass. I think there is a motion to actually amend what was before them of 1 year.
Gotcha. Okay. I'll reiterate what I shared with you all. In this process to Mr. Holland, I would like it to, needed to, or would ask for two, but, accept a 4. But my minimum is 2 relative to that.
Y'all, this is, most superintendent contracts are 4 years. So this is, that's what we are. So we're debating between 1 and 2 years here at the moment. Anything else? Okay. So I think the comment about 2 before, I don't know there was an official motion, so I think we had a motion to amend it to 1 year. We had a second. We've had some discussion. Dr. Shively, would you accept a 1-year contract?
I haven't been offered a 1 year contract with a smile on my face to say that. Until that, we've got to get through this process. I think that's fair, working with you all to say what's the next step at that point. It's just a little awkward to do that in public. But that's the best way to be authentic and the best way to be transparent.
Mr. Holland, is there an in-between a 1 year and a 2 year contract with certain measurements needs at the end of 1 year, or not really?
The contract itself, I think, has to end on June 30. So it does have to be a full year. You couldn't give him 18 months or 15 months, but it has to end on that date, so June 30. So you only really have the option of 1, 2, 3, or 4. If memory, sorry. If again, I'm recalling now that I think the contract itself has to end on June 30th. So with the way his contract currently is, which ends on June 30th, you would be in the position of offering 1, 2, 3, or 4 years and not an in-between time. You could, of course, give him another contract. I believe there is a provision for offering just an extension of 1 year past the 4-year contract, but for a 1 year contract, you'd just be in a position again back before making another decision in a year about whether to reappoint him.
Is there a way to, I guess, offer a 1 year that if certain milestones are met, then a second year?
That's a new one on me. I don't think so. I think the answer is it has to be a first set term.
Any other comments, Dr. Ray?
I think I made it clear. If Dr. Shively is committed to this district, to the partnerships that he wants to develop, to restore the trust of the community, if that's what he's committed to, that's a good thing. And I believe this, 1 year will show us. It will show us, the community, period. Now, I don't think there's anything else I can say. I'm clear. Because I hate to bring this up, but I know several times before we got to this point, I was asked, and I know it was said, if we can just give him 1 more year. Well, that's what I'm going with.
Any other questions from the board?
Did that conversation not happen? It did happen. It did happen, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, again, that's where I'm at.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor, there's a second, there's been discussion to amend the contract that's being proposed from 2 years to 1 year. If there's no other comments from the board, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Koji?
What are we voting on, 1 year or 2 years?
We're
To amend
voting,
this contract for 1 year.
we're voting to amend this contract.
Not accepting contract, just making an amendment.
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
No.
Ms. Howard? No. Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. LeBoon?
No. Really? You know, I'm going to vote yes to amend it to 1 year. And I don't really want to go through this process again in a year, and I recognize, I think, Dr. Shively's, me personally, commitment to do this, but that will help ensure some security and some support from the community. I'll go with 1 year.
I need to say something. Please understand when I say this. My concern, and I'm telling you why I say 1 year, as I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of things that came out that when blackface came out, so many other things came out about Dr. Shively that I was not aware of, had not heard, didn't know. My concern is not just blackface, but how he treats people in general. I have sat and I have watched. I have seen for myself. I've seen how if somebody, I'm just going to be frank. I've seen if he's angry with somebody, I've seen him go after him. That bothers me. That bothers me.
Yes, sir.
I know for certain because I have spoken these board meetings and you guys have heard my sentiments. And I know that Dr. Felix and myself have met with him and we have watched. I've seen where sometimes jobs are created for a reason beyond the eye level. I've seen some things, and I want to see you change that. That's what I would like to see. I'd like to see every teacher, every administrator feel as if they can disagree with you and it be okay, that they'll still be safe. I want this district to have harmony. And for us as a board to act like we don't see it, that bothers me. Because we have sat in this room and you have heard me call some things out that I felt were unfair. Now, the community can be upset with me, that's fine. But I'm going to always stand for what's right. At the end of the day, I can sleep with myself. And I have seen people that have been not treated fairly. And if I need to call names, I can. And if I need to give details, I will. But I've seen it. And it bothers me because my concern is a human issue. How we treat people, I've been saying it and you've heard me say it just recently. We got to give voice to students. We need to hear what they're thinking, what they're feeling. I'm tired.
Where we stand right now is we have a motion on the floor to amend this proposed contract from 2 years to 1 year. We have Ms. Howard and Ms. Hunter Hancock voting to leave it at 2 years, so there were no votes. Dr. Hudson's a yes vote to 1 year. I'm a yes vote to 1 year. Dr. Okoji, we need his vote as to whether to amend this proposed contract from 2 years to 1 year to leave it at 2. Excuse me?
Lisa, what did Dr. Koji?
I didn't think he voted the last time. I thought Dr.
He
Hudson.
said yes.
He did?
Yeah.
My mistake.
You have 3 yeses, 2 noes.
Okay, so the proposed contract is 1 year. My mistake. I thought that Dr. Hudson was speaking before he had cast his vote. Second thing, so are there any proposed changes to the salary as it's proposed in this contract?
Yes, I recommend 3, the same thing the teachers got. His salary, his increase should be the same. That's what I recommend.
So can Angela or somebody give us a quick dollar figure on what that would be? So that we, well, I guess we could do it this way. The current contract states that he would make $155,024.60, which represents a 4.3% increase from his prior contract. Dr. Hudson, are you making a motion that we alter that dollar figure to represent a 3.5% increase from his prior contract?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? So it's been moved.
I'll second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to move the dollar figure on the current contract from 155, which is a 4.3% increase from his previous, down to 3.5%. Are there any questions from the board regarding that? If there's not, let's vote on the proposed change.
Dr. Koji?
Well, hold on, is there discussion that we need to know about? I mean,
We're trying to figure out what the number is, I think. That's the question about.
'Cause I don't have everything in front of me.
I just want to make sure I.
Right, no problem.
I asked if you just take the previous salary, multiply by 1.035%, and what I was asking to that, then my salary is based on the teaching scale from rank and experience, and then there's extended days, and then there's a supplement that you would move to get to whatever that number is.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Is that if other employees receive a raise district-wide, does the superintendent receive that same raise? Or is that just locked in at that number? If,
Yeah, I would assume that, I thought in this contract, as it's proposed, I thought that you would get on your rank and experience the same raise that everybody else did if they got a raise. I'll have to ask Nicholas that question, but I thought that's the way I understood the wording.
I think so too, but there's an amendment to change that from the way it was written, so I just want to just clarify that aspect.
We'll come back to this.
Yeah, do we need an exact dollar figure, or can we just, I think.
I think what we need to do is
I'll run upstairs.
Well-
maybe take a recess, ask you to go by the numbers, the precise number.
Okay,
So she's concerned that she's not getting,
okay,
just doing a multiple is not gonna get you the number.
okay.
You can move to.
And then while we recess for 5 minutes here, till 7:25, I guess, Nicholas, Dr. Shively asked the question, if we amend the contract salary, and then if there's raises next year, would he get the same, is this contract written such that he would get the same raise based on ranking experience that all the other district employees would get?
The answer to that, as I understand it, is no. That's not how I understood the past contract, the last contract. He's not getting raises based on rank and experience, or, as I understand it, on raises across the board with salary. If you put in a flat number, that's really supposed to be the number divided by 12. What Angela's trying to figure out is how do we make sure accounting-wise that makes sense, because it's more complicated than I can understand because I'm not an accountant.
Right.
But she's trying to make sure that when you all multiply, just do a multiplier, that you're not giving more than you think you want. I guess it's kind of like this.
We're gonna come back to this at 7:25, 5 minutes.
What he was.
Just for your comment.
He's got to have t-shirts. These white t-shirts. No, he's terrified. His girlfriend had a breaking toe with his car. His best friend had a breaking toe with his car. And he's got a car that sits in the driveway.
Totally be okay with that.
Do you need another bottle of water? Do you need a bottle of water?
Y'all good?
I'm good. I'm just gonna stand up for a minute. Yeah. Just like lightheaded. Jeans will really not. Oh, okay. Is there space in there? Okay. Cannot ask me.
Because otherwise it's a losing. And it's not our whole goal. Here's what we're going to do. We're trying to do. So look, in fact, our meeting. And we have different tiers and different, so basically, tier 1 supposed to do it, tier 2, you know what I'm saying? So here's what is it happening. What I would love to see
I know.
But basically, there's 3 votes in total. That's all. That's all. The whole contract has, they're still negotiating other aspects. You said I'm getting that? Yes.
I don't like it. T-shirts and.
Thank you.
says 725, 726.
I think we'll go ahead and start back. We're going to hold off until we have our attorney and our financial person back. Are there any other proposed amendments to the contract? I guess we have one that we have not dealt with yet is the out-of-district requirement. And is there a motion on the floor to amend this contract stipulating that he must live within the school district? If there's not an amendment to the contract, it'll stand that he can.
I still move.
So Dr. Koji's made a motion that we amend this contract to make sure the superintendent lives within the confines of the district. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
To live within the confines of the district? Okay.
And the reason is I agree with Dr. Hudson about, you know, you need to live in the district that you're raising taxes on. It's like people, you know, it's not a good thing to impose a law on someone that you don't have to live by yourself.
That's not the
If that
only
makes
reason.
sense.
If board members live within the district and they insist that they should live within the district, they shouldn't leave the district, the superintendent cannot be exempted. He should also live within the district.
I just think also in this day and age with housing situations the way they are, sometimes you need some flexibility to get the housing situation that you want also. I think that's a consideration. And I guess it was pointed out that it's not necessarily standard in everybody's superintendent contract, and as our attorney pointed out, not all superintendent contracts don't have that stipulation in them. I think that's just worth mentioning. Is there any other discussion from the board regarding the out-of-district? So the motion is that we amend this contract to say that he must live within the district. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Lagoon?
No, I give him some flexibility. All right. The next is, were there any other suggested amendments to this contract regarding working days or expenses or the coverage of civic dues, what the district would pay for or would not pay for in terms of those? Okay, we'll go back to the issue of salary. Do we have, so
Yeah.
if I remember right, where we stand with that is that there was a motion, correct, that we amend the contract for a 3.5% increase from his,
Yeah, my recommendation would be for you all to amend that motion to a sum certain. So that it's a sum certain, an actual amount, like the existing contract, a dollar amount, versus voting on a 3.5% salary raise, because I think the way the accounting is done, he receives a salary based on like experience, and then he receives an adjustment basically for, I guess, it's additional duty pay. Is that?
It's extended days and then additional duty pays.
In the accounting to get it up there. It's just sort of I think it's just a bookkeeping type of thing more than it is anything. But I think from Angela's standpoint, from my standpoint, it would be easier if the motion and the contract read that the salary would be increased to